Mike's unmuted.
Good evening. I'm calling to order the Design Review Board for May 7th, 2019, and at 6 p.m. I'd first like to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to introduce our staff and board members, starting to my left.
Bob Buscemi, the city architect.
Cody Hendricks, Planning Tech.
Charlie Roberts, 13645 Freemanville Road.
Reed Casey, Bethany Road.
Tim Bryan, I have a business here in Crabapple.
Laura Weissong, I live in Crooked Creek.
Jeff Dufresne, I live on, building a house on Summit Road.
Mike Stevens and White Columns.
Okay, great. I would first like to have somebody make an motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
Are we good? Is everybody?
Yeah, are there any changes for this evening on the agenda?
No, there's.
Okay, great. Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Would like to have somebody make an approval for the April meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the April meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Our first item up on the agenda is for demolitions, and the first demolition item is for Mountain Road. Demo address is 2170 Mountain Road. And Mark Cherry is the applicant.
Yes, Chair, I believe the applicant will not be appearing tonight, so we're going to have to defer it. But we do, because there was so much discussion on it and concerns at the last month's meeting, we've invited our chief building official, Gary Mullinex, here. So I wouldn't mind if he could just say a few words on some of the specific items of concern that the board had last month.
Yes.
Gary's going to be the one addressing all of those concerns. And I asked him tonight to come, and he is the city's chief building official.
Great. Thank you.
Good to see you. Just to give you an update of what I know about this project, I spoke with a gentleman yesterday. He informed me he was going to be out of the country today, so at that point, he obviously wasn't going to be here. I got an update in the sense that he still owes me, because this goes back to a directive I gave him probably 45 days ago, or probably within a week of the event, to produce some information I needed from him in regards to environmental testing, both of the building and of the site. He gave me some information at the beginning. It wasn't enough. I told him I needed more comprehensive information according to the directive I had originally given him. So he's telling me he's got something this week. He expects to be back by the end of the week and give me an update from a contractor who he currently has confidence in. I'm still waiting for what I need. If I don't hear the kind of update I'm looking for by the end of the week, I'm probably going to give him some kind of new directive come Monday for production, and then we'll see, along with this other city staff, where this goes from there. I can assure you, though, that from my perspective, the issuing of the permit for the demolition of the house will include all the requisite information that would be as if it was, and I've explained to him, it's kind of like a project where a site's being developed and they discover that there's an old fuel tank from an old gas station on site. It's not unlike that. We have to kind of assess what the conditions are, and then we have to assess, what has to be done about it, but depending on what's there, and then we have to kind of assess at the end of the project that the condition that was presented is abated completely. So it's really a three-step process, and I can assure you that will happen. because, I'm the one signing for the permit when the permit for the demolition eventually does go out. If in fact that's the way he goes, and hopefully that will be the case. I think that's what we generally would want to happen. I think he has some kind of plans to develop the property or market it later. I don't know exactly his financial plans, but obviously it entails some redevelopment at some time, I would think. And he's going to need that clear sort of documented site assessment to assure whoever may purchase a property that there is absolutely no leftover contamination on site. So I can assure you that will happen. So that's where it is currently.
I think I know one of the concerns that came from the group was the contamination from to the actual groundwater and just general air while the building's actually being demolished.
Well, so there's the building itself, and he had some assessment of that. And, most of the things in there had to do with a diesel fuel and the actual chemical of the drug itself. He had some analysis for that. It wasn't sufficient in my case. I wanted more because it was not conclusive or analytical in the sense that it has to provide an analysis of it, not just the fact I know what this is. We need to know the parameters under which it has to be managed. But the other part was about the site itself. There's a septic field out there, which is every indication from, I was out there the day it happened, talking to DEA agents that basically said that a lot of times they cross-contaminate septic fields by dumping product or contaminants into the septic field. So that's part of the requirement I have for him to analyze the site, to verify the fact that if there is an extent of contamination and then, the mitigation of that. Because you have to assess it, then you get a mitigation program or whatever that scope of work is, and then you have a testing at the end to validate the fact that you were correct in your analysis and that we have removed all of and not only that the product is effectively taken to wherever it can be disposed. You can't just dispose of everything in any landfill. So if it is of a certain nature, it'll have to be handled according to EPD requirements for those kind of products. So there's that.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I just was thinking, what's the best way for a board like this to handle that? So we don't delay the applicant, more or less approve, a demo of a house and ensure that they're going through the right protocol through obtaining the permit.
Well, I'm sort of legally and professionally responsible for issuing the permit. I can tell you, not the first time I've done this kind of thing before in several senses. So conceptually, the house is your responsibility to manage the first sort of threshold that he has to clear in order to have permission to come to me in order for him to provide a scope of work. Because even some of the information that I need is not even on the initial application he gives to you. I got to have construction entrance. I got to have all the limits of disturbance he has, including this other scope of, taking up dirt and disposing of it if that's the case. And like a trail. So if he has, asbestos has to be, tested in the house, and there's probably indication there may be some of that based on the year it was built. He'd have to show a chain of custody of that to the right kind of landfill. The rodent leather rodents, so make sure he's not chasing, a lot of vermin out of the house into somewhere else. And then also the site stabilization. At the end, he's got to provide the scope of work to show how he's going to stabilize the soil he disturbs, taking it out and bringing it back to grade. So it's, like I say, limits of disturbance is BMPs for soil and erosion control methods, because there's a little pond down below there, and we don't want mud just getting washed down in a rain event. So it's a site plan with a lot more information that we would require. So I can tell you that will be done. As technically, I'll be reviewing his scope of work for mitigation of the contaminants on site. My threshold for that is accountability for qualified people providing the information along with an analysis of what's to be done with it.
So we could say something to the effect of, we approve this demo subject to your getting with the, going through the right permitting process,
Yes.
making sure that site's going to be clean, and just
Right.
attach a subject to it and be done with it.
Well,
We'll come back.
and for him to market the property, he's not going to want to leave something there that creates some risk value to somebody he may sell it to, and we're not going to let the citizens or somebody buy it and then find out there's something residual there. That's just
Yeah.
not going to happen. I understand his predicament. You know, this is new news for him, like it is for the city in a general sense. But he owns a property. It happened on his watch as the owner. He has to manage that. That's his responsibility, and we're gonna document that process completely. They'll be discoverable because eventually someone may come in and ask, what happened here? And we're going to be able to provide documentation to prove that it was handled the way it should have been handled. Like, that's certain.
Any other questions from the board?
Question, is this something we keep deferring, or since the responsibility is in the applicant's court, do we just wait for him to come back?
Yes. We usually, when the applicant's absent, we always defer because we want the applicant to be here before we make any motion.
Gotcha.
And that's fine with me. And by then, hopefully, we'll have this other information too. Not that I would expect, this body to review that for, continuity in the sense that, what's the totality of the information and what is the basis of his mitigation program that because I didn't say he had to do necessarily anything until we get an analysis that tells us, in fact, what he has to perform on site.
Yeah, he was asking the board for, the trouble he was having was trying to identify who does the analysis. So people were trying to give him input into.
He's responsible to do that. I'm responsible to take the information he provides and decide whether it is effectively managing the information I'm supposed to document. If it is, then once he conceptually gets past this board and from theoretical perspective, I'll do the technical revision of the scope of work for both the analysis and then what's going to be part of that sort of on-site. I mean, if he doesn't find anything in the septic field, nothing out on site, then he just turns into, what's the analysis of this? Because I know there was diesel fuel there. I know there was acetone. Acetone's pretty volatile. It's probably not contaminated the same way, but diesel fuel may be something like a fuel tank. Mm-hmm. Be my guess. I'm not a professional about that. I wouldn't be the analysis of that, and I don't know the nature of the contamination, but I was there, and it was ongoing, pretty odd criminal event. It's criminal in its nature. So.
Let me ask this. Reed was sort of headed somewhere. Would we, Bob, your input, would we approve this? Because I don't think we have a problem with the demolition. Now that we've heard from you, would we approve it?
Well, that's sort of
conditions?
procedural reality of the way the board functions underneath the rules of the board, whether or not there's a requirement for the person to be here to hear it or not. That's something the board would, and Bob has indicated.
Yeah, we've always had the applicant present.
Yeah, I think we get into legal questions.
We could approve it as a board to say we want to demo it, and then the applicant comes back in and says, no, I've decided I'm changing my mind, and it would be a different legal path for Gary to take, but it would, I want him to be present, or she to be present, whoever the applicant is to be present every
I
time the
think we
board makes
would
that motion.
be going down a legal path that we would need legal assistance from our city attorney before we did that.
But even like I said at the beginning to him, I don't theoretically condemn properties. What I tell people is that here's the condition I know of. You got to confirm the analysis of the situation, and then your decision is to decide whether to mitigate by demolition or repair. So it's not a take until I tell him, basically, and I don't do that generally. What I tell him is, and I did this, I told him no one can be in the house until I reissue a certificate of occupancy, if in fact he decides to remediate. That is still an option he holds, because if he can prove that he can remediate it, then, I would give him a scope of work permission for a permit to do that. But our preference is that he take the building down. Okay. But I can't compel him to do that. It's a benefit cost analysis for him. If he thinks he's going to be eventually, marketing this property as a redevelopment, whatever, then it's probably to his advantage to take it down also. But we're waiting. And by him making this application, that would assume that he still is of the mind to take it down.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I'm available if anybody has any questions. You can call me and whatever. I'll keep Bob informed about process. If we get new information about if he shows up with the data, then obviously for us, sooner is better than later. But it's a process.
Yeah, if necessary, we've called a meeting vote early or in between meetings if that's the case. We've done that before. Yeah, special meeting.
And that was our kind of thought process in the very beginning. If we could have cleared that bar, then I could have been more. But again, he still wouldn't be anywhere near a permit today, even if we had done that.
Okay.
Because I would not have the information I need today.
Okay. Well, that's extremely helpful. No, we appreciate you being here and providing clarification for us because this was a bit of a different case.
It's an odd
Very
circumstance,
different.
but nonetheless, it's a learning curve for everybody. But again, it's not like to me. It's just like because I've been through this process with brownfield projects, which are large, like EPA, EPD kind of contaminant. And also smaller projects where you have like a fuel tank that's leaking in the ground or something like that, where they got to find out what's there before they find out what they got to do about it.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you.
So I believe our next step here is we need to make a motion to defer this until the next meeting.
I move to defer this to the next meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Our next item on our agenda is a courtesy review, and that would be item V19-005. The address is 13925 Haygood Road. This is to allow existing location of accessory structure, codes -64-416. And the applicant, Drew Farnham. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes.
No, Gary.
Gary
Is it
Beelan with Drew
Gary
Ethel
Beelan.
Farnham,
Okay.
representing the owner, Mac Ham.
Okay,
So
great.
just state your address too. Name and address for the record.
My address my name is Gary Beelan with Drew Ethel Farnham, 303 Peachtree Street, Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you.
The owner, Mac Ham, who's with me today, is requesting a variance on Article 10, Division 2, Section 6441 or 416I of the Milton Code of Ordinances to allow him to maintain the existing location of a repurposed accessory structure in what's been designated as the front yard of his 7.5 acre property. It's actually 7.5 acres. For background, the covered riding areas were not permitted to be located in the front yard under Fulton County's ordinances, under the applicable ordinance in 2000. As provided in Mr. Ham's application, his predecessor in interest applied for and Fulton County approved a variance to construct a covered riding area in the front yard of the property. Upon approval, a covered riding area supported by industrial-grade steel beams was constructed in its current location. So when Mr. Ham purchased the property, there's a covered riding area in the current location. Though Section 64-415A of Milton's Code permits covered riding areas in the front, rear, or side yards, 64-416, which is the section that we're seeking a variance from, only permits accessory structures in the rear or side yards. Notably, and I don't know if this is terribly important for today's purposes, both 64-1, which is the definitions in Milton's Code of ordinances, and 64-415 are silent as to whether a covered riding area can be sided or whether the interior can be surfaced. So it's just silent there. Mr. Ham's intended repurposing consists of affixing earth tone siding, metal siding, to the existing steel beams, to adding a garage door with an access ramp to an existing driveway, and to surfacing the interior of the existing structure. Otherwise, the size and configuration or location of the structure built in 2000 will be unchanged. There's not any expansion of that area. As noted in Fulton County's approval for the 2000 variance and the current site plan, which is included in Mr. Ham's application, the property is a neck property. There's a very narrow entrance off of Haygood Road. It goes back for about 250 feet, and then it opens up to the right or to the south, to the main portion of the property. The rear quarter portion of the property is a lake, and there's nobody behind the property. To the front, there are properties that are street front, and those properties go deep about 200 feet before they get to Mr. Ham's property line. And then the structure, as it currently is located, is about another 150 feet behind that. So we're about 350 feet off the road and 150 feet off the road front neighbors' property lines. To the west of the, again, to the rear, to the west is a lake and trees. To the north, it's about 300 feet from the structure to the property line. Just incidental to this, Mr. Ham had already planted about better than 3 dozen evergreen cypress trees, because he wanted just to have the border area there as well. The mid-quarter of the property consists of a relatively modest size residential structure, and then there are 2 existing ancillary structures, accessory structures. Those were all in existence. They were all as they existed when he purchased the property in August of 2018. Also, as reflected on Fulton County's approval and in Mr. Ham's application, the structure is located on the high ground of the lot. The contour of the property runs generally from southwest to northeast. So the structure is on a high point. Obviously, when they looked to build the structure, approve the structure in 2000, that was a significant factor, and you can see that we attached Fulton County's approval for their variance at that time. It is in the least restrictive area as far as any water flow is concerned. So given the configuration of the property, the location approved in 2000 was and remains the only practical location for an accessory structure. Despite the structure being located in what's technically the front yard. And again, because of the configuration of this property, about 90% of the usable portion of the property is front yard. So no matter how you slice it, we would be here for a variance because Mr. Ham is going to need an accessory structure. So regardless of whether he repurposes an existing structure or has to add another structure, there's no way for him really to, as a practical matter, to have to construct an accessory structure without a variance. Milton's code provides that AG1 districts encompass lands devoted to a wide range of uses, including residential and closely related uses, and that buildings may be used for purposes customarily incidental to any permitted use. Again, the property is purely and simply residential. Mr. Ham has used it residential and intends to use it for residential purposes. There's no commercial component involved in this matter. Since his uses and intended uses are permitted uses under the code, objection really can't be reasonably made that repurposing of the existing structure does not comport with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Again, it's a permitted use. The only issue really before before the board is the location. And again, as I said, the location is exactly the same as has existed since 2000. So the issue is not whether he has a right to construct and use an accessory structure for residential purposes. It's just the location in the front yard as it's designated. As a practical matter, the residence and other enclosed accessory structures located on the property are really modest in size from a square footage standpoint. They don't provide a whole lot of space for storage purposes. So again, as discussed, an accessory building was necessary for Mr. Ham to have storage facilities at the property. And as noted before, again, because of the configuration of the property, vast majority of the property is the front yard because of the neck configuration. Though the size of the enclosed accessory structure is admittedly larger than what Mr. Ham would have built, it's roughly going to be like 13,000 square feet. If he was to build something, he wouldn't build something that was 13,000 square feet. But given the alternatives of leaving a steel exposed industrial grade steel beam riding center and constructing another accessory structure on the property, or demoing the existing structure, which, I mean, they've gotten some prices on that. It would be just ridiculous to try to take down and demo the existing structure. From an economic standpoint and just from a feasibility standpoint, siding the existing structure is economically preferable, definitely cost efficient, and at the same point in time, again, I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but you know, an earth tone metal siding building is, I would say, objectively at least equal to viewing industrial grade steel beams that are being unused on a mud pit below it. So if we didn't do this, again, the options that Mr. Ham would have would be to maintain something that is of absolute zero use to him whatsoever, and which is, you know, would ostensibly be an eyesore, or to again put the earth tone metal siding on the place and use it for repurpose it. In summary, the enclosure of the accessory structure in its existing location poses no issue to the health, safety, or welfare of the public. If anything, the enclosure promotes the public's health, safety, and welfare by eliminating an attractive nuisance. Again, like I said, it's sitting out there. Nobody's going to use it. It's just one more aspect of liability. Clearly, you have a place that's enclosed and locked for personal use, and residential use is going to be, I think, more in conformance with health, safety, and welfare. Furthermore, by approval of this variance, we'll do substantial justice by permitting Mr. Ham to quietly enjoy his property without needlessly incurring the additional costs of either dismantling and demoing the industrial steel beams or maintaining a structure that is of no use to him. And then we also are avoiding the construction of yet another structure, accessory structure, which would be of use on the property. That's all I have. Are there any questions in particular?
Well, yeah, I mean, good description. I think what I'm struggling with, and maybe other board members are, is it would have been helpful for you to have some pictures, documentation of what you're going to do on the siding. Without that, we're trying to guess what that's going to look like, and that's really hard for us to see what the end product's going to look like in order for us to give you input.
I actually have some black and white.
Okay, that would be wonderful. That would help.
Well, I just want to bring up the
Yeah,
board's
go ahead, Bob.
attention that the work has been done. It was, he completed the work,
Oh, it's already been
I
done.
believe, without securing a work permit. So maybe the
Okay.
applicant can, would
Okay.
you embellish on that a little bit? Because I know
Sure.
that the
Yeah,
city did
and
issue some stop work orders
the-
and things.
ignorance is no defense from the rules. But you have an existing riding structure that's there. The thought process at the time was, all I'm doing is siding the place. I'm not building anything new. I'm not putting any electrical in there. I'm not putting any plumbing in there. I need a place to store my stuff because they are, again, moving into it. So the thought was that he wasn't doing anything. And again, the ordinance is clear. It says if you're altering in any way or manner. But you look at it, if you're not on a board, or if you're not in zoning, or if you're not a lawyer, and you're just an individual looking at this, you're going, I'm just siding the place. Again, no excuse, but it is what happened with this. Again, I had this discussion with Mr. Ham through the process of this, saying, why didn't you? He goes, why would I? I said, I'm not building anything new. I'm just covering it. So let me see if I can pull.
If you want to pull it out. Do you want an overhead projector?
Pardon me?
Like an overhead projector for it, or is it a digital copy?
I don't know if I could know how to use an overhead projector.
Well, we can set that up for you. If you have an actual photo, we can set it up for you. So I just want the board to know, it's my understanding that there was walls installed, there was a concrete slab installed, there were overhead doors installed, there's a loading dock installed, and driveways going up to it. So I still want to make sure that the applicant explains more of the intended use of this.
So there's 13,000 square feet under cover on a concrete, and you don't want to use it for commercial use.
No. And again, this is...
What are you storing in that? Just household items?
Household items, there will be cars, which is where I said there would be, he works on cars. Doesn't work on them, it's his hobby. So it's not a commercial component. So that's what I said. There's going to be accessory structures that needed to be built. The ones that are on the property right now are really small. They're...
Yes.
I don't know what they were previously used for, but it's more like a closet than a storage area that was there. So, as I said, if he's going to build something else to park 3 or 4 hobby cars and plus storage space, the house is relatively small. There's just not a whole lot of storage space in there. So he's going to build one that's 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square feet maybe. Not going to go up to 13,000, but when you're looking at the cost of removing the industrial steel beams, which you can see on this one, this is the before picture of the property. And if you look, the shed that was built with the covered riding area. So that's been there since 2000-ish. It was there when we purchased the property, when Mr. Ham purchased the property. But going to the square footage, again, you're looking at the cost of taking that down, even if we constructed another one there. Let's say we went through the variance process and we say, well, we want to build a 4,000 square foot one. The cost of demoing that steel one and constructing a new one is substantially more expensive than siding the 13,000 square foot one, even if he's only using half the space. So it's a matter of economics at that stage.
Can I ask a question and make a comment?
Yes, please do.
Having lived in Fulton County 48 years, I want to get clear that this was horse country and a variance was given for a riding ring in horse country. And that was the intent, more likely than not, of the commission back at that period of time. Had this been presented for a variance, because you are very accurate with the legal points, and I concur with all your legal points, but where I have a problem and where I have an issue with this is, had this gone before the variance board in Fulton County and said, we'd like to build a 13,000 square foot concreted sided automobile storage building, it would have never been approved, I don't think, and having lived here 48 years. And I don't think it's this board's responsibility to the citizens of Milton to get into economics about cheaper to side this building than tear it down. That is not, in my point, should even be brought up. That's not the topic. There should have been a building permit applied for, might have been rejected. It wasn't. This shouldn't have been cited. It was approved for a riding ring in horse country. It was never approved for an automobile storage building. And I think that's where I come down, and I think it's very intellectual about all the economics and the demolition and all those, having just bought a property in Milton and done a demolition myself. It is very expensive. But I went and got a permit and got approval to change the property, and that should have happened here.
Well, again, I appreciate that, and again, I can't argue with any of that, except the law, which is not a small matter. It's a large matter. You know, the zoning is permitted for the health, safety, and welfare. And fundamental to property ownership is you get to do with your property whatever you want, unless it infringes upon the health, safety, and welfare of others. That's the whole basis of zoning.
Right, so my next question to the applicant would be, which is very important to this board, is before you undertook that activity to make modifications, did you consult with your neighbors? Because that is a very big deal here.
And understandably, and I don't think that he did. And again...
Okay, and that's a problem.
Sure,
Okay.
and that's, there's no way of, like I said, the only thing that we can do with that is, and again, take it for the 2 cents, honest mistake in this regard. Again, we're not looking at, and as a lawyer I look at this, and I do look at this from a number of different standpoints. One is, again, the realization, look, just because you didn't know what the regs were, you didn't know what the ordinance was, doesn't give you a free pass. But you do have to look at why. And in a situation that nothing is being added to the property, and again, beauty in the eye of the beholder, and I'm going to address Mr. Roberts' comments here in a moment too. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but for one who's seeing steel, you know, you could see the steel girders on this thing. That ain't pretty. I don't care who you are.
Covered arenas around town with the steel girders look beautiful. I mean, I think what he could have done was go to Bob and say, hey, look, Bob, I need to enclose 5,000 square feet of this building inside the steel girders. Gotten the opinion of the neighbors and been fine.
Yes.
Right?
And absolutely, that's...
If
I'm
you're
sorry.
concluded with your, I believe he's finished with his presentation. I think we might have some public comment.
Right,
We have some
and-
cards. So I'd like to hear, right, from public comment.
Yeah,
And then if the
I
board
would.
wants to have discussion, the board can have discussion.
Right.
And the applicant.
Yep.
You can sit.
I had one other picture of the
Okay, if you'd like to
structure
show
when
that,
it's
can
done.
you-
Can put that
can
on.
you- Do you need help with that?
I think Cody had me on.
Okay, so that's the enclosed.
It gives an idea of, I don't know if I can
Can
put
you,
both
can
up.
you explain to the board just what's the height of the structure?
Yeah, what is the height?
It's exactly the same height as it was previously.
What is that? Do you know? Is it 10 feet high, 15
It's
feet
about
high?
20 feet on the edges and probably 24 in the center.
It's about 20 foot high.
Which now becomes a solid wall
Instead of a see-through.
instead of a see-through with air and wind and sun and light. And I'm in no way a lawyer, but as we discuss this, the word use is real important to me. The neighbors and the variance, and since 2000, the dates you bring up, the use was a riding ring. The use now is a walled, enclosed automobile storage building. That's a gigantic shift in my mind.
It is, but it's a permitted use because it's related as a residential use. It's a permitted use. That is one, how he used it, as long as it is not for commercial purposes, that's not really, I mean, obviously anything's going to factor into your all's decisions. But as far as the use as a residential storage facility is really not before the board or before the zoning commission. It's the location in the front yard that is. So he can build, theoretically, if the lot was configured appropriately, and let's say that the lake was not in the back of the yard, let's say that was just a flat area, he would be completely within his rights to construct this in the backyard. Again, because
Not
it is
without a building permit.
Well, certainly,
You're
definitely.
You're making a change to the intent of the original structure.
Absolutely. And there's two separate issues. One is the variance that we're here for today. The other is the building permit. And again, we can't rewind the hands of time. But I do think it is very important to understand that when you're evaluating this, the use is not at issue. He has a right. It is a permitted use to build an accessory structure in the rear or side of the property. He's precluded from doing that due to no cause of his, because of the configuration of the property where, and you have these site plans in front of you, the usable portion of the property is front yard. There's nothing usable in the back. There's very little that's usable to the north on the side, and there's very little that's usable on the side to the left. So the only place for him to construct an accessory structure for residential use, and it's not for us, I don't think, to decide whether one's hobby is acceptable or not. It is a permitted use. So the question comes then, is the location of that permitted use, is it contrary to any of the four factors that we have? And to the point of, you're right, economics in zoning is a very nominal issue. But one of the factors is unduly burdensome, and the doing substantial justice. To ask Mr. Ham to expend the money to remove a structure on the property with the steel beams, and they might, some, like I said, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, so some might deem them pretty. But to expend the money to remove those, to construct a building that he has a right to use, and we'd still be back here, right in front of this same board, asking for a variance because he has to build that in the front yard.
Right.
So,
Right, so I need to really move on.
Yes.
We've given you a lot of time.
Thank you.
And so we now I have folks from the community that want to get up and speak on this particular item, so I really do need to do that. And we'll come back to you.
thank you.
We have a total of 3 cards. for
3
this
individuals.
application.
Okay, so for those who are going to speak, they will call your name. You need to state your name and your address. And then we have a total of,
30.
is it time, 10 minutes on the clock? 10 minutes on the clock for all speakers.
That's unfair.
Got the little timer.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if they need more time, the board can always,
Yeah, I am happy to
Provide more-
extend time
extend
if you
time.
need additional time.
to be equivalent to the applicant's time.
That is true. Yep, thank you.
So the first that will be heard will be Tony Rich, 1960 Bethany Way.
Is it okay if I go first? Because they have less to say.
Okay, Tony. Tony, you're called. Come on up, Tony. No,
Can I get the projector back?
yes?
Would that be okay? I'm sorry, I almost said something earlier, I just didn't want to interrupt you.
No, that's okay, Tim.
You want me to wait, or go ahead?
He'll be here, and I'm going to hit the computer here. And just give it 1 second, he'll come down and
Okay,
set you right up.
thank you. I can go ahead. Okay. Good evening. My name is Tony Rich, and my family and I live at 1960 Bethany Way here in Milton. We purchased our horse farm about 2 years ago. And we just finished building our dream home earlier this year. We just moved in January. And One of the greatest aspects of our farm when we looked around Milton for a piece of property was that we were more or less surrounded by other horse farms. Almost to every direction, with a couple of exceptions, we had horse property on all sides of our farm. The property that we're all here to talk about is immediately to our south. Our backyard to our home backs up to the building in question and the areas, the other structures. And our outdoor riding arena is immediately across the fence from this building that we're talking about. The property used to be owned by the McGoldricks, who lived there for 18 years. They ran a very well-known equestrian farm, and they did a great job of putting their property together. One of the best parts of their farm, in all honesty, was their beautiful, very impressively built riding arena. It was probably one of the nicest outdoor covered riding arenas around Milton, and Karen was well known in the dressage world as having a first-class facility over on Haygood Road. So I do have a couple of pictures that I'd like to share. This is the picture of how it looked before, and our property was on the far end down here, kind of looking over this property. And as somebody pointed out earlier, the ceiling was high enough that, in all frankness, you could just see straight through it and really didn't even pay much attention to it. Here's what it looks like now. And you can see the little side structure that was there before, but needless to say, the rest of the building is kind of overtaken what was there before. I think a couple of things that I'd like to point out. The very large industrial warehouse garage doors were never there, and the full-size poured concrete loading dock was certainly not there before. What was really a nice equestrian arena is now a large metal industrial warehouse with the doors and a full-size loading ramp that I'm no expert, but it looks to me like you could back an 18-wheel truck up to that ramp and more or less unload anything you'd like. As we talked about earlier, this was done with no permit, no approval by the city, and definitely no input from us as one of the immediate neighbors. We've only been here for 2 years. We love the city of Milton. This is not what Milton is about. This is not what we invested in. In all honesty, this is the exact opposite of what Milton is about. It's certainly not what attracted my family to come to Milton from Sandy Springs in the first place. From where we sit every day on our horses in our arena, this is an eyesore. And it's unfortunate because I am all about property rights. The last thing I want to do is tell a guy what he can do on his property. But this has really been a headache for us, and it's unfortunate. Our hope with this farm is to create opportunities for kids to ride horses. In a perfect world, we'd love to have kids with disabilities out there on horseback. And if this loading dock, in fact, is used for large trucks, the first time a truck lets its air brakes off and a kid gets bucked off of a horse, it's going to be a mess. And I really hope that doesn't happen. That would be a disaster. My final point is this. A lot of people, volunteers, city employees, our local government work very hard to hang on and preserve our rural, small-town equestrian community. The logo's got a horse on it. It doesn't have a warehouse on it. I think if we allow this to take place, which it frankly already has, but if we allow it to stay, I think the precedent that is being set in Milton is very dangerous. And who knows? I mean, every covered riding arena or barn around Milton could be turned into a warehouse. And I really hope that doesn't happen. So thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, the next one will be John Steele at 13875 Haygood Road.
Good evening. Thanks for letting us talk. My wife Kathy and I moved to Haygood Road in 1988 into this nice equestrian community. The subject parcel takes up literally the entire back property line of ours. It's a full view from one end to the other. Around 2000, you heard the discussions about the McGoldricks coming in and wanting to build a covered riding ring. And they went around to the neighbors and they asked all of us if we could support it. And we said as long as it was an open dressage ring, we didn't have any problem with it. It was clearly an obvious use for a horse farm, and we all supported it. Then the McGoldricks sold the property, and I believe it was August of 2018. And in the middle of October of 2018, a bunch of us awoke to all of the lights being on in the dressage ring and concrete trucks pouring in and out of the property. So the next couple days, I picked up the phone, I called the city, and I said, I don't really understand what's going on behind us, but I don't see any permits. And it was a lot of concrete trucks. So that started the inquiry by the city. The first misstep was that they sent a notice to the previous property owners, the McGoldricks, instead of the current property owner. That took up about 4 to 6 weeks. Then another 5 or 6 weeks went on until they finally found the property owner. By the end of the year, and I can't tell you exactly when they finished the work, they had gone in, poured the concrete, put up the framing from beam to beam, and then put the siding up on the building. So the building was essentially complete, they probably know, but sometime around the first of the year. I was then able to get a couple of people further up the food chain involved, the zoning person and the community relations director, and we finally started getting a little traction, and eventually, it took a while, I got them over to my house, and I said, look, I've got a house here, I've got 12 rooms in it, 9 of them face this. My house faces the back. It's very low in front. It's a story and a half, and this is what I look at. So they assured me that the city would look into this and try to come up with a solution. And so I guess what I would say to you is if someone can come in, not provide drawings, not get any reviews, not get a building permit, not go through a zoning hearing, not get a CO, it's better to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission in Milton. And I think that's a really bad message for you guys to send. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, next will be Lauren Holmes at 13900 Haygood Road.
Does that mean I don't have to say my name and address now? Sorry, I know a lot of people out there. Lauren Holmes, 13900 Haygood Road. I live directly across the street from the subject property. So I'm coming at from a different point here. There are laws in the city of Milton, and the neighbors at 13925 Haygood Road did not care. They moved in, added a cement floor and steel walls to cover their riding ring, and took several trees down without a variance or permits. No one should have the right to do this and then come into the city and ask for forgiveness. The only reason we are here tonight is because they got caught. There should be repercussions for blatant disregard of our laws. The walls need to come down, and they should be fined like anyone else for taking down multiple trees for no reason and no permits. No one wants a warehouse in their backyard. If you allow this, you will be setting a precedence with anyone else doing whatever they want in our city, then coming and asking for forgiveness. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other folks want to speak this evening?
That is all the cards.
That was everybody. I'll ask just in case those didn't fill out a card yet. If you still want to speak, you are welcome. Okay, great. Thank you all for speaking. We appreciate your input, and we do take that highly into consideration. Would the board like to ask any questions to the applicant that have not been asked? I will provide my input for the record.
Before, this would be the time where you want to make comments.
Yes.
This will go into the staff report that will be presented at the Board of Zoning Appeals. So just make sure I have everything that y'all want me to write down.
Yes, since we do not vote, we send our information back to the BZA. So after listening to the input from our community and questions from our board and the applicant information, I am extremely disturbed that nobody filed for a permit and decided to take upon themselves to install what I would consider to be a fairly large amount of siding and garage space on a fairly large area, which to me, just looking at this, and I know where that property is. I've driven by that several times when it was an open air riding, and it was actually a very beautiful property. The intent being a horse farm. So having the industrial look does not really fit, and the fact that we broke rules and regs to do that disturbs me personally greatly, since I know I always get permits for taking trees down. I get permits for making modifications to my home, as do, I'm sure, everybody else up on this board. So, and I pay for those permits, and those revenues go to the city. So that is problematic for me. And the fact that you don't consult with your neighbors, who many have been here for many years. I am always bound to consult with my neighbors. I think that's your duty as a citizen and a resident of the Milton community. So I cannot support this, and I will recommend to zoning that they not allow for this to move forward. So anyone else would like to make comments, feel free from the board.
I made my comments earlier, Corey, and I assume that goes in your report. And I agree with Laura on everything she said. And I find it appalling that this happened in Milton. And I've only been here a year and a half, but I filed for all of my permits, and I'm doing everything by the book. And I consult with my neighbors, and I agree with everything she said. This is just an appalling situation that needs to be rectified with all legal or financial means. And I agree with one of the homeowners. If we allow this to go forward, we have just said you can convert every riding ring in Milton to an industrial warehouse. And just can't be.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree too. I'd third that comment, I suppose. I mean,
I'm in agreement as well.
yeah, it's pretty obvious.
I agree. Yep.
If I could just have a moment to respond to the owners, make a final comment. Is that all right?
Yeah. Time response. Yep.
Okay. I appreciate the concern with the lack of a permit, lack of a variance. What I do ask the board, and I'll ask the zoning board as well, is to consider the circumstances that existed, which that is a mandatory factor, is to think about the circumstances, not only of the property, the configuration of the property, but also the intent or lack thereof. We're dealing with no construction, no expanding a space. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm saying if the big concern is you didn't get a permit, you didn't get a variance, to at least factor in the bases, the circumstances that led to those omissions. Number two, you have to think about the concern about the issue and rewind the hands of time. That what happens if he went and did this all the proper way and went to get a permit for an accessory building in the front yard. Again, it's not to be understated, the purpose of zoning, the authority to zone, is limited to the health, welfare, and safety of the community. This is not an equestrian zoning. Last I saw, Milton does not have equestrian districts. This is an AG1 district. This building is 100% permissible. It is a permitted use in the district. Had he wanted, again, there's references to it's an industrial building. It's not. It is a residential storage space. It looks like an industrial center. It's not. It is a residential. So while exercising the authority, the zoning authority that the board has, it cannot leave the base of regulations and statutory zoning requirements. This is a permitted building. It's regrettable that he didn't do it the right way, didn't get the permit first, didn't get the variance. There was a variance on that property already. The location was approved. Milton's zoning regulations say nothing about whether a covered riding area is allowed to be sided or not. It says nothing about whether it's allowed to be surfaced or not. So as you're making this decision, I ask you, what would the board position have been, even bringing in the neighbors with their positions, not in my backyard? There's no legal right to a view into somebody else's property. Regrettable. You think about that. You certainly want to factor that in on a community basis, but it's not the law. There's not an equestrian district in Milton. If Milton wants an equestrian district, guess what? Enact an equestrian district. It's AG1. This is permitted. So I ask that the board, when considering its recommendations, not what you want to do, but what the law binds you to do. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Yeah, I just would continue to disagree at this point. A residential storage space that large, I think, that starts looking very commercial and industrial to me from a use space. I used to work in the storage business. I actually do know that, so that's pretty large. So I don't think the AG1 use is there, but we'll see what the BZA says. All right, so you've got all of our comments, so we're ready to move on. Thank you. Okay. So we've got our next item on the agenda is for final reviews, and that is for the Rayburn Townhomes Phase 3 architecture. And that is Rob Beecham.
Mr. Beecham, if you can just fill out a yellow card before you leave. Just, you can do it afterwards, just.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm actually asking for a deferment for this project till the next meeting.
Okay. We will do that.
Man, I'm tired. This is a long day. Please, I'm tired.
Could I have one of our board members please make a motion to defer Mr. Beecham's project until the next meeting?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to defer silos at Broadwell. No, I'm sorry, that's old business. Excuse me, Rayburn Townhomes Phase 3.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any new business for this evening? And I do have some old business, and that would be the silos at Broadwell, 12455 Broadwell Road, and I believe that is also Mr. Beecham's property. And it looks like we're going to discuss color.
Good evening again, Rob Beecham.
I'm the listing agent, listing broker for this, so I'm sorry, but I've got to recuse myself from. I apologize.
Thank you.
Oh, come
for
on,
reminding
man. That's why
us.
we hired you.
Exactly.
Rob Beecham, 500 Mill Creek, Woodstock, Georgia. We brought this to you at the previous meeting, and just a request to bring back with some exterior color changes. So I believe you have some drawings in front of you, and basically we left the front building similar to the original presentation, and then the building towards the back is in a what I would call a warm gray tone, so that they don't both appear exactly the same.
I'm a little confused for a minute. Is this Milton Point at Broadwell? Somebody said silos.
Yeah, it started off.
Oh.
that was the engineering term, but it's the marketing term is Milton Point of Broadwell.
Okay.
Thank you.
The silos, I was down at the silos.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
Finding you there.
Yeah. This is right across the street from our office, so it's just down.
Yeah, now.
Just down Broadwell.
So I think our last conversation regarding the paint was to look at some variations, maybe some grays.
Yeah. And just for the buildings not to be the same was what we were,
right.
Contrast.
we were
Okay.
doing.
And that one gray. Okay. So gray looks like a.
Those are just shadows.
Oh, are they shadows? Okay.
The building's all
I don't know.
white.
Yeah, I think it does.
Is that the materials?
This one?
Yeah, there's a materials.
Colors that being the same.
Yes, there's a materials page that shows the paint colors on them because it's hard to get a rendering to print exactly the way it is, but those are the actual paint colors. Did I miss? I probably, Lord, I apologize. Does this say Crossroads Brayburn on it?
Yes. Well, one does. I'm looking for
Okay.
this point.
That's a typo.
And there's Milton Point at Broadwell,
Yes,
too.
that's all. This is all Milton Point Broadwell. I apologize. I'm copying and pasting and do I have the right one though? Okay. Yeah, the one page that shows the paint colors should be 4 or 5 pages in.
Yeah, it's
Fourth page.
fifth and sixth page. Yeah.
Okay, 4th, 5th, and 6th page has color chips.
So any questions for the applicant?
Nope, that's good.
You guys, everyone good with those paint colors?
Good.
Yeah, I'm good with them.
It looks good to me.
Yeah,
Good to me.
I think so too. Charlie?
I'm good.
Okay, we're all good.
Awesome.
All right.
We do have one public comment card.
Oh, we do?
Yes.
Okay, yep, let's do that.
Roger Bauer, 2020 Knightsbridge Way, Alpharetta, Georgia. I'm also good, so this is controversial.
Okay.
So I'm glad we're aligned. So thank you.
Okay, good. So you like the colors. Okay.
Got the sale to shut up.
Exactly. So we had voted on this
Yes, we just brought it back. For the
just to look at the colors. Okay, so we're already done then. Okay, yeah, everything looks great. So
Okay.
thank you so much, Rob. Appreciate it. Yeah, we will see you next time. All right. If there is no additional business, then this meeting is adjourned. Oh, wait, sorry, Bob's got one item.
So at the last meeting, it was brought up about, what happens if there's a denial and whatnot, and I didn't really have the direct answer, quite frankly. So I addressed the problem. I pushed it onto the city attorney's office and asked them to give me some direction on it. They've actually said that the way it is right now, the authority of the DRB is kind of spread out all over the code and even spattered into the city charter. But the way it's written in the form-based code is that the DRB is actually a recommendation board to the Community Development Department. So what we do is we ask for a vote so that we know not just comments and recommendations, but we've always asked for a vote so that we kind of get an idea of how many board members are for or against it so that the department can make the decision on what to do. In the past, and I've been here for a little over 8 years, the board has always worked with applicants day to day and tried to come up with resolutions but the real charge of the board to the code is to look at the code and to see that the applicant is conforming with the code. So it's really the code that dictates the direction of the board. The board isn't supposed to come out and say, we like something or don't like it on a personal matter. It's supposed to be that it's something that's written and guided by in the code. Now, and this is citywide, because we're citywide with DRB. That's why it's spattered all over the place. And they're going to do some additional research on it, because we haven't had many just outright denials. We've had none since I've been here. The board has always worked with applicants, deferred, and just worked with applicants to try to get it to where they want it to be. And what happens is, and the board has been extremely successful with this, I want to compliment the board over the years, that if something's in the code and they want something in addition or an above standard, and the applicant is willing to incorporate it, then it usually, we look at it as such that, okay, the board has asked for something, the applicant has agreed to incorporate it, so we've gotten it into the project. And then we look at that as it's going through construction to ensure that everything that the board has approved is actually being incorporated. So again, in the crabapple area, the code is very, very specific, because it's form-based code, as to architectural styles. And the code actually has 7 architectural styles that an applicant can choose from. And those styles have graphic depictions in the code. Then there are architectural standards that say, okay, if you add a porch, it shall look or consider these items. Your windows, if you have windows, it shall look at these. If you have chimneys, it shall be this. So when we're looking at applications, I personally make sure that we check each building against what the code is saying and work with the applicant to find out what style of architecture that they were going for. Now the code, the way it was drafted, has 7 different styles, and there is nothing in there that says that they want each community to mimic another community. In fact, the applicant can come in and take any one of those 7 items, 7 styles, and apply them. And that was there specifically because the code wanted variation throughout the crabapple area. It wants somebody to pick Gothic and somebody else to pick vernacular and somebody else to pick Greek Revival. So what happens is, people are picking these, and somebody might look at it and say, oh, wait, I have a vernacular here, and now if somebody's coming in with a Greek Revival, that's not in context with the vernacular. But that's not the way the code was written. The code was written to encourage variation in styles, and it even goes into, in the description of each style, showing like some colors that are approved, saying, okay, say a white and a light gray is an acceptable color in this particular style. So that's why we try to push the applicants towards those particular colors, or tones if it's brick. If it's painted brick, it's more of a white or gray. So there's different items in there. So the attorney's office said that they were going to continue to do more research for me, because I asked them to look into it more and to better understand what it is, and then to come in and give maybe some training to the board as to exactly what, to remind everybody what the charge is and what our limits are and what we're really doing and how it's to be applied. And this is just in the crabapple area. If you go into the Deerfield area, which we do a lot of too, there are a whole different set of standards that we look at. So those buildings come in and we really have a lot of different architectural standards that are there. And again, that was done specifically that way. If we have townhouses or commercial buildings that happen to be in the other districts, they would still come before you. But again, those character areas would be very different. So when 7 acres comes in up north on the corners, that's in the rural Milton area. It's extremely rural. So when I review that one, we reviewed that one to be very rural, and it did come before the board, and you guys did have a chance to look at that and approve those modifications, and I think they were consistent with that overlay and that character area. So we have these different character areas that are described in the comp plan, and so we look at that and say, are we being consistent with the particular character area? So there is a lot of different moving parts, and I'm going to recommend some additional training because there are so many different character areas and so many different form-based code, Deerfield and Crabapple area, and we can invite the city attorney to come in and just describe exactly what the charge is and what we're doing. And then if anybody specifically needs some more guidance or attention or questions on specific codes or what's applicable and what isn't, then feel free to reach out to me, and then I guess we'll try to set something up where we can, dive into the code even more and describe what it is. I think most of the times, like I said, over the last 8 years, we've really had very good success with the projects that are going through and raising that standard and that bar and kind of getting it up there. So, I want to see if we can maintain that. And they said that they'll look into it further and get back to me, because I asked them, I said, what happens? They basically, I think the short answer, and they're going to give me an official answer, but the short answer is if by chance the board votes and the majority of the board says, oh, we're going to deny something, then that would go back to the Community Development Department. And of course, we would take that extremely serious. If the board's going to deny something, we're not just going to say, oh, we don't care. I mean, we're going to take that as a very serious denial and say, oh, why? And what is it, and what does the code say, and what is the applicant doing, and try to work with that applicant to try to come to some mediation to figure out, maybe get them back in front of the board. I don't think there's any, it was kind of silent on any sort of a time frame, but if there is a hard denial and the Community Development Department agrees with that denial, then I believe the way it is in the charter is that the applicant would then go before the BZA, and then from there go to Superior Court. So, but it would have to be, if there is a denial, and if the board really wants to do one, because we haven't had many, I would ask that it's a very specific denial based on a code section or something more than just, we don't like it, or it's just not something that I would like to see. It'd have to be something in here that's more substantial and tangible, because then we would have to make a decision on what to do and then go to the BZA as a secondary variance under a challenge of the director's decision. And then that would be something the director would have to specifically say, this is the reason why we think and agree with the design review board. It'd have to be something very substantial to hang our hat on, because otherwise the BZA is a quasi-judicial board, and they'd have to do something on a legal basis.
You've got two new board members. Speaking on myself, I'm anxious to have an orientation. We know how to, through the videos on how to behave as a board member, but
Right.
in terms of we know that. But what's the difference in a courtesy review and a final review? How does it go one to the other? I've seen decisions made by this board that are turned down, but get approved by BZA. So just sort of kind of the lay of the land would be great.
Yeah, and I think I'll set up, maybe if it's okay with the board, either at the next meeting, we could do it like an hour before a normal meeting.
Yeah.
Like 5 to 6, so that you're not coming out, or whatever you want to do as a
that'd be great.
board.
And prepare questions.
We could do it. And I think it might be nice to actually go through the form-based codes and actually give a presentation. And we're just setting something up for the BZA to do the same thing. We offered them last month to do a presentation on the specifics of the codes, so that everybody can get more familiar with the actual code. And I'll make sure everybody gets a new copy of the code printed out, and that you can kind of get an understanding of the template of the code and what the code is doing and the different aspects within the code. because it is somewhat complex. And as these projects come in, I will show you, I spend an awful lot of time along with all the rest of the staff. It's a whole team analyzing every aspect of the code, down from landscape, roads, approaches, the massing, the location, the density, the parking, the materials. I mean, it's quite an intensive review. By the time it gets here, it's pretty well vetted, and that's why they're putting in, these renderings and presentations, because we don't really want to bring them here until we feel that they're meeting the intent of the code. And then, of course, the board looks at it and puts their input, and I usually try to work with the applicant to get those, or the community comes in with some comments. I try to get those incorporated, right? I mean, let's get everything we can incorporated so everybody's sort of achieving a great product, which was what we've been doing in the past. So, but we'll certainly extend that to you all and kind of get that in there so you get a better understanding of the codes, and then any questions that you have. And if there's more process questions as far as the difference between, say, a courtesy and a final review, we will explain that to you as well. So we'll do that. So if it's okay, we could set something up. I know we're lacking one member, but we could certainly do it maybe next month or whatever's good, right? Can you send something out, maybe?
I just need to know for advertising reasons. If we do it next week, I have to put it into the Milton Herald. So if y'all want to do that, just let me know.
That would be the next meeting, right?
Yes, that would be whenever in June.
All right. So every time this board meets as a quorum, we have to advertise it. And we can only meet in a public forum like this, and it's open to the public. So even though it's training, it's still open to the public. It's still advertised so that the people know. And if the community wants to come in and listen to the training, they're more than welcome. They'll see it we'll set Granicus so that they could see it on television or the computer as well. It becomes a public forum.
Do we want to commit to next month doing that?
It's up to you all what you want
Since they have to
You
advertise?
need to do it pretty quick, because, understanding things would be better to do sooner than later.
Yeah, I would agree.
We could do that. Cody will send something out, and everybody can just say, yes, I accept, and we'll know that it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I just off of one comment that you made, Bob, about, rarely, denying something. Yes, I would say that's true. What we typically do is if the applicant is missing things or doesn't have enough, we'll send them back to Bob and with a list of things to do, and then come back. So that's usually our process and sometimes they come back 2 and 3 times if we need to, if they really want to do the project, which usually they do at this point. So yeah, we do really try very hard to work with applicants to create a good product for the city and for them and the community, because it's important. They're investing, we're investing, everybody's investing, so.
I may have heard you wrong, Bob, but did you say something at the very beginning where we don't need to share our opinions about things? Did I hear that wrong? Maybe I just heard something wrong. Because otherwise we would just be interpreting the code.
Whether we approve something or recommend an approval for it, for the application to go ahead, really is based on what's in the code. Mm-hmm. So we're even if this board was to say, we would like, a 12-foot projection on a porch, if we come back and we get the application in and it's only allowed an 8-foot projection, then I can't allow it to go forward. Gotcha. So we're always checking against code, and usually we don't bring anything to the board unless we believe it's meeting code. But again, sometimes we get it in, and they don't always give us like floor plans and things. So if they don't, and we're really looking at the exterior elevations, and a lot of people say, I don't want to invest too much until I know I have that approved. But when they do come in with the plans, then we're going back and looking at them still to make sure that they're still meeting every aspect of the code. I mean, we really comb through it to really make sure. It's extremely intensive reviews on every single application. I will assure you the level of detail, and there's a lot of people that are involved with it, the fire marshal, the city fire marshal, the transportation engineer, the site engineer, the architect, the permit. The principal planners are looking at density and parking and location and use. So everybody has their little expertise so that they can really become super proficient at it, so that when we're reviewing an application, we're really checking each one of those items.
So based on what Reed said, if we talk about paint colors as we did on this one, that's not a code-based situation. So was I incorrect that I wanted to look at these paint colors and that was inappropriate?
No. The code in this particular style of architecture allows, it actually describes, okay, if you have siding, we'd like it to be white, an off-white, or a light gray, or a sky blue. So it comes up, it actually gives you a description of a few. So if you came out and said you wanted a purple building, I would probably say that's not going to work. But to say, I would like to come back because I feel like both buildings should not be white is very appropriate, right? Because it gives us options. And when the applicant was looking at them, I said, okay, these are the colors that the code is describing. So when you go back to the board, they want two separate colors, two buildings at separate colors. I think that's very appropriate. That's a great comment, great input, and I thought it was very appropriate. But I'm going to make sure that when he comes back with the colors, that he's kind of coming back with colors that are somewhat described in the code specifically, as far as a color palette, because they do describe some colors that they prefer.
Bob usually pushes the applicant towards color variations that are code-based, which is very helpful to us. The other thing that comes up is materials. Like Marty was always on the material. I'm trying to do good for him, but like he'll look at, because he was in the trade for a long time, so he looks at, what are you doing on the flashing on the roofing? Is it the appropriate material? Those kind of get into nitpicky. Is it going to last?
Right.
Yeah, long-term last, and Bob can go back to the code and say, but here are the materials that are most appropriate for crabapple on that particular building.
Right.
So do we have any input?
Achieve longevity of the building. He was worried about seeing buildings deteriorate over time and saying, geez, people aren't just keeping up on those. And over time, the maintenance of those buildings will become unsightly to the city. So there are several materials that are listed in the code. On some buildings, a maximum of 3 different materials. And there's been a lot of discussion as the code says, I want natural stone. And some people come in and say, we want a synthetic stone. And I know Michael's been extremely, extremely vocal in saying, Bob, I don't want to see a synthetic stone anymore, even brought to us. It says a natural stone. I want a real stone. I mean, that's what the code is requiring, and that's what I want. And people have come in and asked the board for relief. And if the board says that they're willing to give that relief, again, we're taking what the board said. I listen to this board. I work with this board for years. I listen to everything you say, and I am going to make sure that it gets incorporated. So even when one member says something, I am going to ensure that that member's concern is always addressed. If the code says it's got to be a real stone, and that's what he's said, Bob, I don't want to see it again, and he said that, I will make sure that, I tell applicants, if you're going to go in there with a synthetic stone, forget it. The code's asking for a real stone, don't even ask for it, because the board has made it very clear that they want the real stone, and that's what the code says. So
Is that true in the entire city now?
It is.
So in every area, it's natural. There's no.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no.
Another question is if a material was board and batten or siding or whatever, and the board looked at that and said, we'd like to see some brick on that building, or not all board and batten. Is that appropriate, or is that?
It is appropriate because both of those materials are in the code, and the code does not dictate percentages. So it doesn't say, Bob, where the old code, remember the Highway 9 overlay, had very specific
Really
percentages.
specific.
Laura's aware of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it said 85% natural stone, and every one of those buildings was starting to look like, very heavy and hard, like bunker-like buildings. And so what we did when we did the form-based codes is we said we want much more flexibility. We don't want to dictate percentages. So a comment on, Bob, I maximum 3 building materials, and the code does say the heavier should be under the lighter, so that you don't want to see brick on top and siding on the bottom, right? The heavier base, so the code does say that. But if you look at me and say, Bob, I think that wall should be brick or more of it, that's a very appropriate comment to put forth, and I would take that serious and incorporate it. All of this board has done a phenomenal job. We have the best quality of life in Georgia, and I think it's a lot of it. That's what they did give us that title, right? And I think a lot of it's got to do with the work of the Design Review Board, as far as its success over the years of what it's been doing. A lot of people have come to Milton for a specific reason. They happen to like the way it looks, and I think a lot of that architectural character and feeling that you get when you drive through. Sometimes you drive through, you don't even know why you like a place, you just like it. And I think a lot of it's got to do with the built environment, and it's got to do with the landscaping and all of those factors, but every one of them we address. So landscaping is something else that I do ask you to look at to make sure that, because a lot of times landscaping can really make a difference. I mean, I don't want to look at the building just as the building. I like to see the building in its environment. See it. That's why a lot of these, when they're coming in now, I'm telling them, I don't want to see a flat building anymore. The earlier ones, they used to just come in, it looked like it was a slab on grade. And I said, no, now I want to see if there's a slope and how it's integrated into the landscape and the contours, because I think it makes a difference on how that building is coming out. And Jeff has brought up really great points about placemaking, and to ensure that we keep placemaking in Milton, and to ensure that we follow some of the guidelines of placemaking, which is probably not always outlined specifically in the code. I think the code is a guide and a template, but I think he's bringing something that says the way we apply this has to have a certain placemaking, and so when people come in, they instantly identify that they're in Milton. And so I think that's critical. Charlie's input on lighting and materials is critical. I am very happy. They asked me, what do you think of the makeup of the board? I said, I'm extremely happy with the makeup of the board. I have a great cross-section. Mike's in real estate. Laura's, phenomenal and understands the history of everything. She was an activist on doing things in Fulton County before we were a city. I mean, we need that history base. It's very important to understand the base and the history of what we're doing. So I think Tim has been doing phenomenal architecture throughout the city. I mean, I asked him, Tim, why aren't you writing a book? Because he's got so many great pieces of architecture out there, and I really think he's, hit that threshold where he should have his own book. And I said, geez, Reed, you're in the real estate, but I mean, bringing back information on what the market is showing, what we're doing, how things are moving. Very, very important when we're looking at stuff. We're getting stuff in. Just hearing that when applicants come in, even though it's not discussed specifically here on an application, when he speaks and when a new applicant comes in, I tell him, look, that market is just not there. I've heard my board members tell me, and they're out there. They've told me this kind of market is just not viable. Look at a different product. Now I'm working with people. I said, listen, 24-foot product is not selling. If you need to be at the 28, 30-foot wide product. That's what people want. Where are these single-level homes? Where are the, empty nester-style homes? I'm trying to guide people as they come in. They go, Bob, we're looking at this. What do you think? I have somebody coming in tomorrow looking at another piece of property right here in Crabapple, and they're looking to do housing. So, it's that kind of input is so critical to apply to the new ones, and that's what I tell the new applicants. I go, listen, this is what I'm hearing from the board. So having this kind of a cross-section of talent to bring back to the everyday application that I'm meeting with people is so critical. So when I bring it to you all, it's sort of, I think has a little bit of each and every one of you have a thumbprint on each application that come in. And if I miss that mark, then I'm okay with you calling me up saying, hey, you're missing the mark and we need you to change it, and I'll take that very serious. And I'll tell an applicant, wait, you're missing the mark. We need to come back and reanalyze this, relook at something, and refigure it before it goes forward. Because I really want everybody to say, you know what, we're putting into Milton, and this is looking good. I mean, I have a lot of respect, I remember on the board, to really give me that input. So we'll do training. We'll get Ken's office in here to do some legal if you need legal. I'm not sure if we need legal or not, but we could certainly do the training. And we could do multiple trainings too, because there's a lot to go over. And in 1 hour, it's really hard to dive into everything.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
So I just want to know how I'm supposed to be thinking when I come into these meetings, when I get somebody up here that's had a covered arena that they just enclosed, and they're going through, some variance thing that has really nothing to do with us, quite frankly. So we can give our comments whether we like it or we don't, right? Maybe that's considered. But I want to know, should we say comments like, hey, if that's approved, then we want to see X?
Yes.
So sometimes I feel like we miss these windows, but I don't want to make it seem like we're for something that we're not for. I'm for something that I'm not for necessarily.
Right.
So just like that use permit for the school on Red Road, y'all made recommendations regarding the traffic, landscaping. That all goes into our reports that go to Planning Commission, Board of Zoning, Appeals, and then City Council. So whatever y'all make recommendations on, say, landscaping on the east property line, may want to move the driveway more to the west side, or maybe move the placement of the building some way, those all come into account when we make our final call, or if another board makes their final call.
Well, it's just sometimes, even when I'm researching these things, and we don't have a lot of time to look at this stuff, but if something comes in front of us, a lot of times, my brain is set on, I don't really like that project, as opposed to being, well, how can we better that project? Should it be approved?
Correct.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Or if, like it was brought up, if, I think Charlie raised the point, he said, before you could see through the building and now you can't. That's an architectural comment. That's a design comment to say, so that when I sit on the BZA board and when they're there, we have a staff report and they're going to say, what do you think? And they always ask staff what we think. And I always emphasize all the DRB comments. I sit on the DRB, and these are the things that they were concerned about. And that board really honestly takes everything that you say into consideration and either makes it a condition of approval, which they've done, right? They always add a condition. They say, okay, these are the DRB concerns. We're going to add them as conditions. Or they'll deny something based on that criteria as well. So I think it has a really good impact. That's why we ask for your recommendations, because the BZA is looking at it more from a legal term, but there are things that they can condition legally because they're quasi-judicial board, and they could put conditions, and when they could place these conditions to say, Bob, we want more landscaping, we want the screened, maybe a neighbor comes in and they kind of pre-vet it here, and they have an idea, and then we have an idea of what they're looking at, and then you could say, okay, let's address the issues that either the community has or the applicant has. We've had a lot of community members, you see them, that have come in and said, okay, you're building next door. Case in point, Roger. We were doing a development, right, next door to you, and he had a lot of concerns. He said, look, you're abutting my house, and I even live in a different city, quite frankly, right? That's true. And he came to me and said, Bob, I really have a lot of concerns. And I did tell him, I said, listen, this is not going to get through until we try to address everybody's concerns, one way or the other. We're going to try our best, because that's what we're here for, to really look at people's concerns. And I'm very happy to see that he comes in now and actually says, I'm actually here supporting things. Because that just shows me that we are addressing it, and that doesn't mean we're done. We still have a whole project to build, and I will be out there, and arborists will be out there ensuring that the things that the community has concerns on are continuously addressed as best we can as a city with our limited resources. But we try to make sure that we're doing it. If not, they can call us up and we can say, hey, wait a minute, we'll run out there and look at it. So we really do address and keep all the community concerns. We invite the community in all the time, or an applicant's concerns. I mean, we're really trying to balance everything and get it all in. And so far, I have to say that this board has done a phenomenal job. And I think the city, I always tell people I think we're hitting somewhat of a threshold where you can actually see the incorporation of all these great pieces of architecture occurring, and connections, crosswalks, roadways. All of this stuff is coming into play now, and I think the city's really developing quite nicely. The way the board has envisioned it, the way the council has envisioned it. I mean, the council's the one who wrote the codes, and their envisionment of what we're doing. We always look back at the original master plan, the original visionary study. From time to time, we'll update these visions. We've updated the Crabapple Visionary Study many times. So, we keep looking at it because we realize new people move into the city, people move out of the city, economics changes, people change, the development might be occurring, and people look at it and say, oh, I'm thinking maybe something needs to be done. So we update it from time to time. But there is a certain amount of security without changing the code too frequently. It's almost like, maintaining some level of consistency is very good for the marketplace to know. Like, if Reed's marketing things, he's got to know that, people want to buy things knowing that there's a certain amount of consistency coming down the road and that things aren't changing too rapidly. People get nervous with too much change. So having some consistency is okay for me. I feel like we're in the implementation phases of these form-based codes. We've done them, we've analyzed them, and now we're starting to see that implementation take effect.
So Bob, one quick question. What's going to happen with, I saw the Bethany Ben project that went to city council and it got voted down. So what are they going to do about that property? Is that gone now?
Well,
are they going to try and come back?
The council did vote it down.
Yeah.
So now it's up to the applicant or the landowner, if the applicant wants to continue and revise it, or if the landowner wants to remarket the piece. But certainly, as submitted, it was denied.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Veterinary clinic? No.
Okay, just wanted to know.